Nightmare at the side of the road. Looking back on this today, I can't help but wonder what might have happened had my girlfriend Stacie and I not been packing heat. To take you back, this was in the mid-90s, way before it was commonplace to see anyone on a cell phone. Nowadays, it's almost crazy to see someone without one. Honestly, the many things a cell phone can do for you, it's truly outstanding. Sure, you can communicate with family and friends, but you can also use it as a tool, GPS being one of the greatest advantages. Say you wanted to take a trip across the country. Well, no longer do you need MapQuest, or a physical map you might pick up at the dollar store. I digress. Stacie and I were heading home from visiting my parents during the holiday season. We were in the middle of nowhere, rural Georgia, and we had about 3 hours left to get back home. I remember it had been raining pretty heavily, as flashes of lightning could be seen in the distance, and the rain hit the windshield like being in a busy car wash. Stacie sat fast asleep in the passenger's seat, and I had my cup of coffee I'd purchased from a 7-Eleven keeping me awake. At about 1:15 midnight, I began to notice the left side of my vehicle sinking toward the ground. My car wasn't exactly top-notch, thus it took a bit to realize my issue. We had a flat tire. So I go ahead and slowly come to a stop at the side of the road, and this causes my girlfriend to wake up. "Hey babe, what's wrong? Why are we stopping?" I catch her up on the flat tire situation, and she starts to freak out. She's always been the paranoid type, and being stuck out here in the middle of nowhere at midnight during a rainstorm wasn't exactly helping her nerves. I reassure her I had seen a call box just a ways behind our parked vehicle, and this seems to calm her nerves. I will tell you one thing. Stepping out of your vehicle in the middle of nowhere, with the only light source coming from your car headlights, is pretty eerie. I couldn't help but feel someone or something was going to pop out at any moment with an axe, and then try to cut us into bit-sized pieces. I guess that's what happens when you watch one too many scary movies. Luckily, I always had my little .38 special in the glove compartment, which ensured if anyone were trying to cause us an issue, they would have to get through that first. In any case, I walked approximately 30 seconds to a call box as my girlfriend waited in the vehicle. If you've never used a call box before, it pretty much has 4 buttons. Blue is for accident. Green is for major service, such as a mechanical breakdown or a need to send a tow truck. Black is for out of gas or flat tire, and then yellow is to cancel. I went ahead and pressed the green button, which ensured I would have someone come and help us out in no time. One of the key advantages to call boxes is that your location is immediately known. That's why I wasn't too worried about our current circumstances. Sure, here we were abandoned in the middle of the night, but at least we had the certainty we would soon get help. Anyways, I returned to the vehicle, completely drenched from the downpour, as I try my best to warm up using our heater. Approximately 6 to 7 minutes of seeing no vehicles, we noticed headlights in our rearview mirror. Now, the nearest town was approximately 30 minutes from our location, so it was pretty impossible that help was already going to arrive. As expected, it wasn't our help. Instead, it was an old truck that drove past us. Not that I could really blame them to do so. You never know who you might be dealing with in the middle of nowhere. However, just as soon as they had appeared, they turned around and then drove to our vehicle before coming to a stop. A man, from what I could tell, was in his early 40s with a large beard, beanie, and overalls, comes over to our window and asks if we needed any assistance. I explained we had a flat tire and that we were currently waiting for a tow truck. Still, I thanked him for his concern and said he was free to leave if he wished. The man, caught off guard, looks over at my girlfriend and then asks what our relationship was. Not really sure why he needed to know, but I told him she was my girlfriend. The sudden grin came over his face, almost as if he was excited from this sudden information, but he quickly gains his composure before saying he would love to spend more time with the two of us if we let him into the back seat. Honestly, I wasn't even sure what that was supposed to mean. He says he was just trying to be friendly and wanted to ensure no one tried to come up to our vehicle and attempt to rob us, but I told him that wasn't an issue, not mentioning the revolver, and this causes the man to get a bit frustrated. "Come on, open the door. I don't bite." the man said jokingly, as he reached for the back door handle and attempted to open it. It was locked, and this is the point I tell the man he needs to leave. Frustrated he didn't get his way, the man makes his way back to his vehicle, and we think he's about to leave. Maybe it was just some random dude trying to scare us, we thought. But then things got worse. Less than 10 seconds after getting into the driver's seat, he jumps out of his truck, but this time he's got backup. And by backup, I'm talking about a baseball bat. Surely he wasn't going to invite me to a game of ball out here in the middle of nowhere. The man approaches our vehicle for a second time, and this time is more firm with his request. Let me in, otherwise I'm going to break the window, and you won't like what I do. Stacie, on the verge of a meltdown, reaches into the glove compartment and then passes me the .38 Special. All of a sudden, I see the man's eyes go wide, and he drops the baseball bat in shock. Before I get a chance to say anything, he tells me that he was just playing around and he didn't really mean anything by his statements. I tell him to leave, and he does, not before picking up the baseball bat and then returning to his vehicle. The man drives out of there, never to be seen or heard from again. As for our assistance, the tow truck driver arrived no more than 15 minutes after our encounter with the strange man. We asked the driver if they had sent anyone out earlier. Strange question considering the previous man had a regular truck, and of course he assures Stacie and I he was the only one sent out in this direction. Thankfully, nothing else happened, other than just being driven back to town, where we ended up renting a motel room and staying the night. We made it back home the next afternoon, but we still don't know whether or not that man was serious, or why he even wanted to break into our vehicle. Was he really that desperate to keep us company? Most likely not. So friends, I will leave you with this tad bit of information. Be very careful with who you interact with, especially when you're out in the middle of nowhere. Come prepared, and expect the unexpected. They were hiding in the alley. You know, one of the beauties about summer vacation is just that, being on vacation and being able to do whatever you want. This was during the summer of 2015, when I had just celebrated my 18th birthday. My parents had helped me purchase my first car, which I would be using to commute to my college, approximately 30 minutes from home. Before I would get into this next part of my life, however, I spent almost every day hanging out with my friends and my girlfriend. Honestly, it's so hilarious looking back at that summer. I was like a complete stranger anytime I was at home. My parents would see me and be like, "Wow, didn't expect to see you here." One evening, my mom and dad had left for the weekend so they could celebrate their wedding anniversary. This left me home alone, with the only thing keeping me company being my 2 pet hamsters. Not exactly the types of pets you want on your side. Say you had to deal with a home burglar or home intruder. I guess their cuteness could be enough of a distraction, so you could whack them over the head with a bat or a golf club. At any rate, I spent that first evening alone, mainly watching Netflix and ordering some pizza. The following day was my girlfriend's day off from work. She spent all that day keeping me company as we swam in the pool and even did a barbecue. Once the sun had gone down, we went into the living room to continue our movie marathon that we had started in the morning. However, halfway into the Avengers, all the power had shut off. Not exactly fun when the temperature was still in the low 90s. Anyone who lives in Arizona understands just how hot it can get in the middle of August. So anyway, I went out to the backyard to check the circuit breaker. After messing with the switches a couple of times, I realized it wasn't just our home. The entire neighborhood was experiencing a blackout. Sure, we could have stayed indoors and tried to keep as much cold air in the rooms as possible, but that house got hot pretty quickly. It was unbearable. But luckily, we had the swimming pool. We spent approximately 20 minutes in that pool playing water volleyball and trying to keep ourselves entertained. I, being the competitive dude, was a little excited when we were playing volleyball, and I hit the volleyball with a little more force than I should have. It also was a tad bit windy that evening, so the ball ended up going over the fence and into the nearby alleyway. I was just going to let it go and grab it the next morning, but for whatever reason, I told my girlfriend I would hop over and grab it. Besides, what could possibly go wrong? Apparently, a lot. So, I hopped out of my pool, grabbed a towel and some chanclas, that's Spanish for sandals, and I make my way over the fence into the alleyway. Now, this alleyway was the kind that connected you to all the other homes on the other street. That means you're pretty much facing a bunch of garages and some dumpsters. I used the flashlight on my iPhone to begin searching for the volleyball. I found it lying next to a dumpster, and then I go to retrieve it. As I bent down, a hand appeared from behind that same dumpster, and I nearly had a panic attack as I jumped back and bumped into a light post. A disheveled homeless man in tattered clothing holding a beer bottle looks at me with a look of disgust. I mean, all I wanted to do was grab the ball, not sure what he was so angry about, let alone what he was even doing in the area, considering this is a relatively safe community. I apologized for the inconvenience as I grabbed the ball, and this was when I looked up and saw the man whisper to someone out of my view. Moments later, another man, similar look and all, approaches me, with the first man approaching me by the rear. I start to get a tad bit nervous, but being the tough guy I am, I hold my own, telling them not to mess with me. The first man tells me to hand over my phone, and I just laugh it off thinking he had been joking. What I saw seconds later sent a chill down my spine. The second man reached into his pocket, and he takes out what appears to be like a blade. They both reassure me to hand over the phone, and I chose to run instead of fight. Now, some people might call me a big baby for doing so, but in that moment I was more concerned for my girlfriend. Not that I wanted to jump to conclusions, but what if they had another one of their buddies trying to get into my backyard where she was alone? Quite a stretch of the imagination, but it was what it was. I quickly make my way to the fence as I just feel the swipe of the blade against my shirt as I make my way over. My girlfriend is caught off guard hearing all the commotion, and I tell her to get into the house. She didn't even question the command. She hops out of the swimming pool, still drenched, and then proceeds to head into the living room. As I'm about to head inside, I see the two men begin crawling over the fence. These guys were really looking to cause trouble. They reach the back door, and then they begin pounding on all the doors and windows, as I hold my girlfriend tightly in the kitchen. We called 911, and my girlfriend yelled out at the two that police were on their way. They, however, continued to attempt opening the windows, but they eventually gave up and jumped back over the fence. Thank goodness that this was enough time for police officers to find them and catch them after we had given them a description over the phone. We later learned that both were under the influence after drinking excessively all that evening. Also, as I already had expected, they weren't even from the area. Why they chose to hang out in our alleyway? Who knows? How none of the neighbors noticed them was an even larger mystery. Whatever the case was, nothing as remotely creepy like that has ever happened in my neighborhood again. Summers at the convenience store. I like to remain anonymous in this entry if that's cool with you. I was working on campus at one of our little convenience stores 2 years ago during the summertime, and funny enough, I was listening to some scary stories from the creepy fox. For just some context, I'm female, and I was 19 years old. As this was during the summer months, the shop was usually empty. The only people that showed up were the college students living in the dormitories, but even that wasn't enough to keep me company or entertained. That's why it was pretty cool that the manager let me listen to music or watch videos on my phone, just so long as I had one earphone out and only did it when the store was empty, which was about 90% of the time. I really enjoyed that job. It's a shame that when you're having so much fun making easy money, there's always that one person who has to ruin it. Seriously, people, if you're the kind of person who likes to cause trouble, do yourself and everyone a favor. Be more productive. Get a job. Volunteer at a hospital. Be nice. Ugh. Anyways, it was about 3 p.m. and I was off at 5. My manager, who usually only shows up once during the shift, had just left, and I continued to listen to some creepy fox videos. A couple of students came into the store and I helped them with their purchase of hot dogs, chips, and soda. Once they were gone, a good friend who we're going to call Anthony showed up to say hello. He also purchased a protein bar as he was going to head to our gym that's on campus to do a quick workout. We're still really good friends even today, by the way, and both him and my boyfriend play video games on the weekends. But that's besides the point. Anthony pays for his snack, and then he leaves, saying he was going to come say hello one last time before I'm off the clock. Fast forward approximately 30 to 40 minutes later, and I haven't had a customer since Anthony, and I now started playing Candy Crush on my phone. Yes, I am and still am one of those who enjoys that game. My attention was suddenly focused to the door when the bell chimes, and a man, not a student, walks into the store and begins stumbling around the aisles. Now, we do occasionally get people from the community to come and buy stuff, but it's very rare. After all, there's a Walmart just a couple of blocks away along with a bunch of other retailers. Our little campus shop is mainly for students. At any rate, I put my phone away and I start to organize the display of chips and 5-hour energy drinks on my front counter as I keep an eye on this 30-something-year-old. He ended up walking out of the store, but not for long. Less than 10 minutes later, he's back. This time, he's here with an intent. He approaches the counter where I'm at and then begins to tell me how beautiful I am, while asking me what I was doing after I got off of work. I ended up telling him I was currently seeing someone, but he kept insisting he just wanted to hang out and maybe grab some food. It was totally uncalled for when he said he could convince me to leave my current boyfriend, as he apparently had a job where he made 6 figures. I've never been about money, and I think he was hoping he might be able to get himself a naive college student. That wasn't going to happen. I now proceed to tell him that if there was nothing else I could help him with, he had to leave. The man suddenly goes into a fit of rage, smacks the displays of 5-hour energy and chips off the front counter before going off on a rant. I'm grasping my pepper spray in my pocket, but not actually taking it out, as all this man was doing was arguing. I try to remain calm, but then I lost it when the dude seriously has the nerve to pull out a knife. That was it for me. I told him to back away as I take out my pepper spray, using the front counter as a sort of barrier. The man dares me to try using the pepper spray, but before I do, the doorbell to the store chimes once again. It's Anthony returning from his gym session. This crazy man looks over at Anthony, clearly realizing his dream of getting lucky was starting to slip away. Anthony, being this amateur bodybuilder over 6 feet tall and 240 pounds of pure muscle, approaches this creep as he tries to swipe at him with the knife. Anthony, in one quick motion, punches the daylights out of this man as he drops to the ground almost instantly. Anthony grabs a knife and then tells me to call the campus police station. By the time the man came to, officers had arrived and taken him away for questioning. Anthony ended up staying by my side the entire time, which made me feel a lot better, especially considering what I had just gone through. My manager arrived shortly after, and he let me clock out 30 minutes early. That evening, I told my roommates about the incident, and they complimented me on how well I handled the situation. So, that was the time I was working on campus during the summer, and this admirer who fell for me at first sight tried to get me to go on a date with him, only for my friend to help me out when the creep took out a knife. When the game becomes a reality. This happened in the fall of 2013, when GTA 5 had just released. I was in my 3rd year of college and taking all online classes this semester. This made it pretty easy to play as much of the game as I wanted, so long as I got ahead on my work. I did, as the 4 classes I took that semester allowed me to submit assignments weeks in advance. I had to prioritize my gaming after all. I'd waited years for the next installment. No amount of reading was going to stop me. Side note, I may have or may have not ghosted a bunch of my friends that week. Sorry. I attended the midnight launch with my 2 friends, Eric and Kevin, and by the time I got home, it was 2 in the morning. I didn't wake up until 5 p.m. the next day, as I was exhausted. As soon as I got up, I made a cup of noodles and then loaded up the game, ready to get started. I played for hours on end. Before I knew it, the sun had once again gone away for the evening, and my roommate Corey had returned from work. Corey left almost as soon as he arrived, as he was going to go on a date with his girlfriend. This meant our apartment was going to be empty, not that I was complaining. Fast forward to around 10 p.m. Corey is still out for the evening, and I'm taking a break from playing, opting to take a shower and just relax in the tub. As soon as I got up to dry, I ended up hearing a door opening somewhere in the house. I froze for a few seconds. Then I calmed my nerves when I told myself it was just Corey returning from his date, although I did find it quite odd he would already be here. The next day was his day off. Normally he will stay at his girlfriend's house if he's not working the next day. But whatever. I put on my boxers and a t-shirt, turn off the light, and just as I'm looking out the restroom door and down the hallway, I see it. I catch the glimpse of a tall figure in a black hoodie, grasping a pistol. My body went numb, and time seemed to have slowed down to a snail's pace. Unless Corey was playing some sort of prank, there would be no reason for him to be walking around the home armed. We had no such arms to begin with. I was this close to calling out Corey's name, but all the alarm bells in my head were telling me otherwise. What to do? I could try facing this guy one-on-one, but I was a goner if he spotted me, and that sidearm of his was the real deal. My only option was to hide, as the only way out of the house was through the front door, or the windows in the front living room, where this person was. I had to make a quick decision. As I can hear this home intruder stomping, a mud hole, so to speak, in the living room, I quietly tiptoed my way to my room, which is just to the left of the restroom, and then down the hallway. I then proceed to lock the door and call 911, nerves at an all-time high, and hands shaking and sweating from the shot of adrenaline. The dispatcher told me officers were on their way, and I was advised to put anything I could in between me and this intruder. I didn't want to make any noise, however, because as far as I knew, I have yet to be spotted. Now, unfortunately, my door sucks. That's the nice way of putting it. The lock barely even works. What I mean is the locking mechanism itself is pretty faulty. We were supposed to get someone to come and fix it, but we always procrastinated since it wasn't really a big deal. We always knocked before entering each other's rooms. But now I'm just hoping whoever came into my home would leave. But of course, that never happened. I laid under my bed, using some dusty shoe boxes and blankets to cover and hide myself, still on the phone with 911 by the way. And then, I hear the footsteps making their way down our hallway, and then my worst fears come to life. My bedroom door handle begins to jingle. Please let the lock work. Let this be the 1 in a million chance where I don't have to worry. That's what I tell myself. Lady Luck wasn't on my side. The door unlocks. The intruder enters. And now I have a better look at this intruder. Yes, my suspicions were correct. He did have a pistol, a typical looking 9mm. He had a balaclava covering his face, making it impossible to identify just who they might be. They also wore black gloves, so any fingerprints would remain a mystery. Frantically, he heads toward the drawer, and then starts throwing whatever he could find into a backpack he was carrying. I was so bummed because that drawer was where I had all my video games and even my savings. About $1,000 in cash. There was nothing I could do but wait for the police. By the way, I'd stopped talking at this point as I told the dispatch lady I had to stay quiet. She was listening the entire time. For what seemed like an eternity, but was really only like a minute, this man ransacked my room of all my valuables. Thank the heavens above he didn't bother checking under the bed because I would have very well screamed like a kid. He makes his way out of my room, presumably to leave. But he had no idea what was waiting for him. About 8 officers in total outside the house, armed and waiting to snatch him. The man, from what I was later told, immediately put his hands up and gave up without a further fight. The pistol was a dud, and apparently this guy had a criminal history, being connected with some home burglaries that happened just earlier that year. Talk about determination. For those that are wondering, Corey hadn't locked the front door. Apparently he had told me to lock it, but I guess I didn't hear him since I was so focused on playing the game. I don't know why this burglar chose to break into our home of all places, but we have an idea he might have been staking it out for quite some time. You bet we had a locksmith change the front door locking case, and we fixed the door in my room. I moved out a couple of years later, and I now live back at home with my parents. Bumping into the wrong urban explorers. What do a couple of teenagers do when they've had enough of playing the same video games over and over again and want something new and thrilling? Well, why not explore an abandoned location? That might seem like a great idea. That's what we thought a few years back when my friend Billy was spending the weekend over at my house because my parents were away. Living in rural Oklahoma all my life, things get boring pretty quickly. Yes, I do have a car and we can go into town, but even that gets old. That's why we thought of getting onto our bicycles and taking a trip through the countryside. That way we could get some fresh air and possibly see something new. We took a trip down one of my family's fields for about a mile before reaching our mailbox. It's here you can get onto another dirt road that eventually leads you to the paved road and then into our small town. We opted to cross over into another large field that isn't owned by anybody. We had gone there a few times in the past, but never considered exploring or checking out some of the old barns that had been left over since the mid-2000s. Today was the day to see what it had to offer. We continued riding on our bicycles, talking, laughing, having a good time for about 2 miles, until we reached said barns. There were 3 of them. 2 of them were completely destroyed, with their roofs caved in and large front doors missing. The other barn still stood standing, with its red paint of the past, now chipped away from years of rain and winds, which gave it its distinguishable grayish red. We parked our bicycles next to a tree, and then began to approach the barn. There was a bunch of debris, some that looked to be rather fresh. There were some food wrappers, water bottles, and even some newspaper clippings. Quite odd considering the family that used to live here had been gone for more than 10 years. My friend Billy started going on about how it probably wasn't a good idea to enter the barn. Even I was starting to get those same nerves. However, we already made it this far. What's the worst that we could stumble into? Maybe a skull and some bones? We reached the door that easily towered over Billy and I, and then slowly push it forward, as it creaks and echoes throughout the entire structure. Some birds that had been napping in the barn are easily spooked and fly out of the building, causing us to have a mini panic attack. Everything looked calm, no signs of people whatsoever. The tractor that had been left abandoned was rusted. Some farming tools laid perfectly still in a patch of hay. Even a barrel filled to the brim with rainwater remained dormant. Now this barn featured an upper level, which you could climb up to if you used a ladder. I know trusting that ladder with our weight was a bad idea, and you don't need to tell us otherwise, but we were curious enough to attempt climbing. To our surprise, it was sturdy to hold our weight, not that we were super heavy. Both of us are roughly about 150 to 160 pounds. Anyways, it's up here at the top we find some graffiti, spider webs, old hay, and a couple of more barrels. We were reading some of the silly messages that had been left over, when all of a sudden, we hear shuffling just outside the barn. Billy and I immediately go silent, and then we peek over the second floor to see if we might find the source of the disturbance. Perhaps if we were lucky, maybe it might have been a wild animal. If we were lucky. Nope. Instead, here are 2 dudes, normal looking in their late 20s, appearing to be drinking some beers. Who are these 2? The owners of the property? Highly doubtful. One thing was certain, however. We don't know what their intentions might be. Billy and I keep watch as the 2 begin taking pictures and talking about exploring. We now begin to lighten up, thinking these guys were fellow urban explorers. This was when we get the brilliant idea of coming out of hiding and introducing ourselves. What could go wrong? Billy speaks up and says hello, and here's when things take a turn for the downright frightening. One of the guys takes out a pistol. We start to freak out, as the one who took out the pistol asks who was in here. We scream our innocence, telling them we were just a couple of teenagers exploring the barn and didn't mean to cause any issues. After a few seconds of awkward silence, the 2 on the ground start to laugh before saying they were sorry. Apparently, we frightened them, so much so, their reaction was to take out a pistol. Regardless, we weren't sure what to do. Should we really step down there and confront them? Or should we wait and hope they'll leave? It's not like we had any other option. We take our chances, with the man who had the pistol taking out the cartridge in good faith, and then placing it on the ground to show us he truly meant he was sorry. Billy and I told them there were no hard feelings, but instead of sticking around and talk, we left, opting to go on our bicycles and head back home. We never did file a police report, since we truly believe it was a misunderstanding. I don't know. Do you guys think we should have? Whatever the proper answer might be, please learn from our mistake, and you'll avoid dealing with something as scary as bumping into the wrong urban explorers. Backyard camping. This just happened last week and it's still fresh in my head. I was bored and decided to set up a small tent in my backyard where I would spend the night making s'mores and looking up at the stars. My parents were busy renovating the house anyways, and my room was currently being painted. That's why when they asked me if I wanted to sleep in their room, I opted for the backyard. The last thing I wanted was to be awoken by my dad's heavy snoring. I can't tell you how many times I regretted going on family vacations and having to share the same room with my family. Sorry, Dad, but your snoring is way too loud. Anyways, to keep me company, I had my pet bull, Rocco. So after dinner, we watched a movie and then my mom and dad went to bed once it was done. This was the point I'd go outside and get started in our little fire pit. I began making the s'mores, and Boxer soon joins me. After getting my fill, I take out my laptop and start playing Minecraft, looking up at the night sky every so often. Close to 11 p.m., my eyes are feeling pretty heavy, and I decide it's time to crawl into the tent. I zipped up, crawled into my sleeping bag, and Boxer and I soon drift off to La La Land. Fast forward to roughly 2 in the morning, and I'm awoken by Rocco, who was growling and acting restless. "What's wrong, Rocco? You need to go potty?" This was his secret word. Rocco looks at me and starts jumping like a little kid on a sugar rush. This normally indicates to me that I was correct. I slowly zip the tent down, and then Rocco, almost like on cue, jumps out and beelines it toward the house. You see, I wasn't aware of this, but as we were sleeping, someone had managed to get into our backyard. Everything in this moment goes by fairly quickly. Thus, I'm going to go ahead and break it down for all of you. To start, my tent was at the far end of the property, right next to my father's tool shed. The tent itself was camouflage color, and unless you were actively searching, you wouldn't have even noticed it was set up. Continuing with the recollection. Whoever was trying to open the back door, wearing all black clothing and a ski mask, immediately stops what they're doing and books it toward the side fence. They don't get too far, however, as Rocco tackles them to the back lawn like a quarterback football player does when making a catch. I saw something fly toward one of the bushes, and it wouldn't be until police got there that I realized what it was. My dad, hearing the commotion, runs out of the house and sees quite the strange sight. Rocco chomping down onto a burglar's sweater, and me standing there completely frozen. My dad manages to grab Rocco, and the burglar immediately runs to the front yard. However, I don't know if this was luck on our side, or someone from above looking out for us, but a police officer just so happened to have been patrolling the neighborhood. My dad manages to wave the officer down and tells him that man running away was trying to break into our home. The officer chased after him, and soon he was able to get him into handcuffs. More officers arrived soon thereafter, and they looked around our property. This was when I remember seeing something go flying from the burglar's hands just earlier. I lead the officers to the bush, and what we discover sent chills down my spine. A revolver. I am so thankful that he hadn't had the opportunity to use it, because otherwise this story might have turned out to be a lot worse. I'm also thankful for Rocco being the ever so protective dog he is. He ended up getting extra treats the next few days, and we even bought him some new toys to show our gratitude. We're currently in the process of getting an alarm system set up. If there are any updates or any other scary incidents, I'll make sure to share them with you and the rest of the Creepy Fox family. Desperate for a delivery driver. Ever since this whole lockdown thing went into effect, making money has been pretty tough. There is one profession that is doing fairly okay, however, and that's food delivery. Uber Eats in particular. In case you were unaware, you aren't limited to just delivery by car. You can in fact deliver on foot, or by bicycle, and even scooters. After talking to my friend Naomi, who delivers for Uber Eats, she was able to convince me to try it out, and so I did. I fell in love instantly. You chose your own hours, and you can work as much or as little as you want. Hey, at least it beats not making anything whatsoever. Around a month ago, I had started my shift, roughly 7 p.m., and I went to pick up an order at a Panda Express. It was only a 5-minute ride from my home, so what a great way to begin. I pick up the food and then look at my app to locate the address. It would take me roughly 3 minutes to get to the home. But what a 3 minutes they were. As soon as I get on my bicycle and secure the drink in my cup holder, some random man in a gray Ford F-150 drives up to me and asks if I needed a lift. I told him no and get on my way, thinking he was just trying to be friendly. Hey, during these tough times, you'd expect the least people could do is offer a helping hand. I exit the parking lot of the Panda Express, and then I ride toward the traffic light, where I'd have to wait across. The man in the Ford F-150 pulls up to me and once again asks me if I needed help or a ride to where I was going. With a friendly smile, somewhat annoyed he was once again insisting on the same topic, I told him I was fine and thought that would be the end of the story. The man then asks me if I was seeing anyone, if I would like to grab some food, to which I don't even say anything. The Walkman sign came on, and I immediately booked it. After all, I have an order to deliver, and I'm surely not going to waste any more time talking to this stranger. Now, here's the weird part. Traffic was pretty light this evening, probably because it was a Sunday and most people had to work the next day. The man in the truck was appearing to be following me, as he took advantage of the empty streets and lack of drivers that might be tailgating him. I'm starting to panic a bit in the inside, but thank goodness the man turns a corner at the next light, and I think maybe he got the idea and gave up. I was able to get into the neighborhood of the delivery, passed over the food to the friendly old man, and then returned to my bicycle. But as I am leaving the neighborhood, I see him. Ford F-150 has returned. Great. Have you perhaps changed your mind? Come on, I'll take you to any fancy restaurant you choose, the man says as he pulled up to me. I let out a disgusted sigh and went from scared and nervous to angry and frustrated. No, I'm working, so could you do yourself a favor and kindly go about your way? I may have used 1 or 2 curse words in that sentence, but I'll save your ears from the language. I noticed there was an alleyway at the end of the street that was pretty narrow for any vehicle like his to pass. I thought this could be my perfect getaway, but I guess when you're determined, you'll put your vehicle to the test. The man actually has the nerve to follow me into the alleyway and does something downright frightening. Seriously, people, never do this to anyone. I don't care who or what it is. The man speeds up, causing me to jump off my bicycle and dive toward a couple of trash cans. Thank goodness he didn't get me, however. Even my bicycle was spared. He then puts on the brakes, steps out of his vehicle, and begins to approach me. My heart begins beating at 1,000,000 miles an hour as I'm covered in both sweat and garbage from the trash cans I just landed next to. By nothing short of a miracle, I see a garage door open and a man with a German Shepherd on his leash step out into the alleyway. Guy in the Ford F-150 suddenly stops in his tracks. He books it back into his vehicle and then drives away. I was breaking out in tears as the man with the German Shepherd comes up to me and asks what had just happened. I gave him the SparkNotes version as he helps me with calling the police and giving them a description of the man and the vehicle. As of this writing, they haven't found him, which is quite unfortunate, but maybe he learned it wasn't such a great idea to go after people the way he did. One can be hopeful, as I have yet to encounter him. I now have pepper spray at all times. Avoid stopping at lonely gas stations. My wife and I were just returning from Vegas a short 3 years ago when we decided to take a quick break at a gas station to grab some snacks and use the restroom. Although I was part of this scary encounter, it comes from my wife's perspective. I come into play toward the end, so I'll go ahead and tell the story from the start. We arrived at this empty gas station, and first thing I do is put some gas into our car. My wife Emma went into the little convenience store to grab us a couple of waters and chips. Once I'm done filling up the car, I meet my wife in the store. I tell her I was going to use the restroom. She says she would wait for me at the car, and then we can leave together. Sounded like a great plan. Here's the part, however, where the story transitions to my wife's perspective. My wife was standing next to the passenger seat as she didn't want to sit down right away. We'd been driving for almost 5 hours straight, so I couldn't really blame her. She decided that she would call her mom to catch her up on where we were, and that we would soon get to her house since we were going to have dinner together. As she's talking, a man in a blue hoodie approached her and asked if she had any extra change. My wife, being the kind-hearted soul she is, reached into her pocket and pulled out the wallet I had let her borrow for buying snacks. She says that she was about to hand over a $5 bill when the man suddenly got this smirk across his face. The man said, "Hand over the wallet." My wife, caught off guard by the sudden demand, tells him to be patient, and this is what she described to me next. He puts his hand into one of his pants pockets. He flips open a pocket knife. My wife, scared out of her mind, hands over the wallet, but here's when karma comes into play. As the man turns to leave, he ends up slipping on a puddle of water, and my wife watches as the knife and the wallet go flying. I happen to see this exact moment with my very own eyes. I beeline it toward my wife, and the man in the blue hoodie suddenly runs away, disappearing into some nearby woods. My wife started crying, and I gave her a huge hug, reassuring her she was safe and the man would no longer return. Once she was settled, we went into the convenience store and told the cashier about what had just transpired. We filed the police report immediately after, and a couple of officers came to the gas station to take our statement. We weren't sure if they searched those woods, since we ended up leaving a short time later. The officers did tell us they would keep in contact if they had any more information, but we have never received a call back. He finds my home, then breaks in. This is a creepy story of mine regarding a stalker, who I believe, if not caught, may have seen my ultimate demise. Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration. Maybe. But after I tell you about what happened, you'll understand why even 15 years later, I still think this way. In order to begin, I must first rewind time to 2005, when I was just fresh out of high school. I was the sort of girl who never really considered college as a career choice. I did end up going a few years later, and I did get an associate's degree. But in the meantime, I was actively looking for a job. I tried working at McDonald's. Yes, I know, typical fresh out of high school line of work, and it did come with its fair share of nightmares. But once I moved on from hamburger making, I scored a job working at a makeup store in the mall. I was a sales associate with the occasional interaction with customers who were a bit out there. And when I say a bit out there, I'm talking about the special kind of customers, who for whatever reason are out there to give you a hard time, even when you do everything in your power to satisfy their needs. Anyone who works in retail can definitely back me up on that one. There was one individual in particular who I'm going to talk to you about today. It began on a random evening of work. I was with one of my other co-workers, who we'll call Jessica, and we were fairly busy helping customers. Now, considering most of our customers are female, we do sometimes get the males who will shop for their wives or their girlfriends. This one man who entered the store seemed to fit that bill. A man in his early 40s, decently dressed in a t-shirt and khaki jeans. Well, as I was busy helping out a customer, I wasn't really paying too much attention to him. I just saw him enter the store and overheard Jessica ask him if he needed any assistance. After helping out a few customers, I noticed the man was still looking at some of the makeup. I walked up to him and I asked him if he needed any assistance. He took a few seconds to respond, looking me up and down in the process, then getting this sudden eerie and creepy smile across his face. He told me, "No, I was just bored and I decided to come into the store and look around." I said okay and returned back to the cash register. That's how it began. Over the coming days, that same man would come into the store, but each time he did, he was acting a lot more suspicious. He would be looking at makeup, and then he would raise it up to eye level. Facing me, he would then pretend to be examining said makeup, but I could tell he was actively looking at me. When I made eye contact, he would very quickly and awkwardly turn the other direction. It was just too obvious he wanted something more than just makeup examination. This continued for about a week, and then one day he came into the store with flowers and a box of chocolates. This was around Valentine's Day, mind you. The man actually had the patience to wait behind 5 customers, and when it came to him, he got straight to the point. "I really like you. I wanted to know if you'd go out on a date with me. I brought these roses and a box of chocolates. I just wanted to show you my appreciation." Somehow, some way, he had gotten this idea that I was interested in him. At least, that's what he went on to further claim. I told him I was flattered, but that whatever false misconception he had gotten, it was just that, false. It was pretty awkward, but not as awkward as what the man then did. That smirk of his face turned into one of frustration and rage. He threw the flowers to the ground and then proceeded to stomp on them. He then made a big scene, cursing at me and telling me how I was a bad person for breaking his heart. Again, I was just standing there in shock thinking, what did I do to deserve this? He then stormed out of the store and things went silent for a few more days. here's when something so frightening happened that I don't wish this even on my worst enemies. It was my day off from work and I was hanging out with my girlfriends, watching a movie at the AMC theater. I got him picked up this evening, and when my friend drove me home, we saw something that rose an alarm. Pulling up to the driveway, my friend's car headlights shined upon a dark figure in a hoodie jumping into the backyard. I was living with my mom and dad at the time, but I remember very well they weren't home. Instead of going to investigate, we pulled out of the driveway, and then we parked on the other side of the street. We then called the police, waiting, and thinking we had just caught someone in the process of breaking into my home. This was during a time when there was a rise of home burglaries in my city. 10 or so minutes later, 2 police cruisers drive into my neighborhood. My friend and I waved them down, and then we explained what we had seen. I give them the keys, and they go and check. Less than 2 minutes later, they're walking out the front door with someone in handcuffs. I got the chills when I saw who it was. The man from the makeup store. I couldn't believe it. But he had not only figured out where I lived, but he managed to break into my home, cutting a window screen open. Thank goodness, he gave up as soon as officers spotted him going through my dresser. The man later confessed and said he had been following me for weeks, and was apparently madly in love with me. What was even worse was they found him in possession of mace and a pocket knife. I'm just so thankful that we didn't go into my home, nor did we try approaching the man when we first saw him. It's just scary to think what might have happened had I done so. It's sad to say, but there isn't really much you could do to prevent these sorts of scary scenarios. I guess one way to defend yourself would be to get an alarm system and even some home cameras. From there, you can choose to invest in things like a taser or a pepper spray, which I ended up getting both. Like I mentioned at the beginning, it's been well over 15 years since this occurred, but I'm now married, with my second boy on the way later this year. Shopping nightmare. This was in 2014 and takes place in LA. It happened on a Saturday evening. I'd gone over to my cousin's house because we were going to be watching WrestleMania the following afternoon. That night when I got there, we went to a Ralph's to pick up snacks, such as chips, salsa, soda. That way we had something to munch on when watching wrestling, along with our tradition of Domino's pizza. When we got back to my cousin's house, we realized we had forgotten the most important thing: the paper plates. Realizing our error, my cousin said he would gladly pick them up, but I ended up going and insisting, since he was pretty tired after working a 12-hour shift at his security job. I got in his car, and then I drove 5 minutes to the Ralph's to pick up the plates. I also went ahead and picked up some cookies because I wanted to have some with milk before I went to bed. Making my way back to the vehicle, I'm now in the dark parking lot when I get suddenly approached by a man in a Dodgers sweatshirt. I give him a friendly smile, thinking he was just going to pass me and go about his evening. But then he walks and stops directly in my path. He whispered to me, "Hand over your wallet." I sorta did this awkward chuckle before attempting to push past him. He again steps in front of me, and with an even more firm voice, demands I give him my wallet. This time I'd seen he had his hands in one of his pockets. He was in the process of pulling something out. I don't know what happened next, but something in me said, "Get out of the situation, fast." I attempt to run, but he grabs me by the arm, pulling me closer. I was on the verge of a panic attack. I'm sweating profusely, when indeed, he does flash a knife. And that's when I did something I truly believe saved me. I kicked him in the family jewels, and then he lets go of my arm before stumbling back, falling into some shopping carts. I book it toward the Ralph's, dropping the shopping bag with the cookies and plates in the process. Thank goodness some good Samaritans happened to have seen the incident, and thanks to their help, we were able to give a proper description to police officers. Luckily, he was soon caught and arrested. Now, although that was one less bad guy on the streets, it didn't stop me from having nightmares for the following months. Living in the attic. Back in 2013, for roughly a month or so, I couldn't help but get a strange feeling anytime I was at home. I just couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched, and on top of items being placed in different locations. Something about being alone at night just gave me the chills. Now, I want to preface by saying what I experienced had nothing to do with anything paranormal, although at first that was my conclusion. I also want to bring up that I had another roommate, Juliet, but she was rarely home due to her being the singer of a small indie band. They aren't super famous or anything, but they do travel across the country to try and get their names out there, although as of recently she's taken a break due to all the lockdown stuff. Anyways, at the time this occurred, she only showed up to the house once a week in a roughly 30-day time span. That's why anytime I noticed things being out of place, I wrote them down as her. Still, I wish I would have spoken up because that would have saved me a lot of trouble. For example, I would hear bumps in the night, but my lazy self always wrote them down as squirrels or other backyard animals, as we're in close proximity to a forest. One night, I had arrived home from work early because I wasn't feeling too great. As I pulled up into my driveway, head beating like a drum and rain hitting my windshield, I saw a shadow pass by my kitchen window, being masked by my curtains. My first instinct was that this was the rare occasion I would see my roommate Juliet, but why she didn't text me, I found odd. She always notifies me anytime she's going to be home. Either way, I step out of the vehicle and make a mad dash toward the front porch, getting drenched from the downpour. As I put my key into the keyhole, something in me told me to stop. It's something I can't really put into words, sort of like a higher power looking out for me and saying, "Girl, you better turn back right now." I ignored these warnings as my body being exhausted and entered the home, heading toward the kitchen to grab some water. Here's when it happens. There's someone standing in front of the refrigerator, drinking out of the milk carton. As their back was turned, I wasn't sure who it was. But one thing was for sure, Juliet never drinks out of the carton. She pours the milk into a cup, just like me. So I switch on the light, and that's when I get my answer. A disheveled-looking man. My immediate reaction was to scream and then reach into my purse to grab my pepper spray. "Who are you? And who gave you permission to come in?" The man just stood there staring at me for a number of seconds, before explaining he was friends with Juliet. I told the man that he needed to leave, disregarding whether or not he knew her, and to my surprise, this worked. He walks into the living room, and then proceeds to exit through the front door. I was so scared that my first instinct was to call the police, who showed up in record time. They, thank the heavens, managed to catch the man who was hiding in the back alleyway that's right behind our home. Now, what I hadn't realized was that this guy was actually a fan of Juliet's, who apparently had grown obsessed with her. However, Juliet had no clue he would ever find her home, nor break in and act as if her home, mine too, was his. Also, this guy had been planning this for a while. He was waiting for the perfect night to confess his feelings to Juliet, and in the meantime he was living inside the attic, which, when I went up there with police officers, we found a bunch of food wrappers, empty water bottles, and even some pillows and blankets that had gone missing. There was even a laptop, toilet paper, and a couple of disposable cameras. That explained the sounds I heard some nights. Get this, he had not only learned and memorized our schedules of being in and out of the home, but he'd also stolen one of the keys we kept hidden in one of the planters. You don't need to tell me how bad of an idea it is to leave spare keys lying around, but then again, you shouldn't have to worry about things like this to begin with. Anyways, in summary, we ended up selling the place and I moved about 2 hours north. Meanwhile, Juliet found a place with her new boyfriend. Now, I haven't really talked to her since then, but last I checked in, she was living happily. Crazy customer turned stalker. I feel that enough time has passed that I can begin sharing this with all my fellow Creepy Fox fans and family. If anyone has ever had a similar situation happen to them, I would love to hear how you dealt with it. So this was roughly 5 years ago when I started a job working at my mall. I was 19. I worked at one of those little stands you find outside the actual shops that sells different assortments of candies and chocolates. It was basically just a summer job that I could work during the mornings and then have extra money to hang out with friends, as well as save up for the upcoming college semester. The shifts were very boring. I'd essentially sit in my chair looking at my phone, and then help out any customers who were looking to purchase sweets. On average, I would help out maybe 10 to 15 customers every 4-hour shift. The mall itself was pretty much on its last legs. It closed just a year after I quit. The only thing that remained during my work life there was a Little Caesars Pizza, Subway, Redsel's Pretzels, a TJ Maxx, Hallmark, a few small mom-and-pop shops, and a JCPenney's. Anyways, during one of my shifts, I was reading through some of the magazines my coworker Emily had left me when I finally got a customer. This was roughly 2 hours into my shift. This customer is a man in his early 50s who was wearing a white tank top and some red surfer shorts with sandals. I welcomed him and told him that if he needed anything, just to let me know. I then get back to reading. A minute later, he's hand-selected some Reese's Pieces and M&Ms, and I start to charge him as he asks me a question. "What are you doing after you get off of work, Julia?" Obviously, that's not my real name, but for the sake of this retelling, it's going to be. By the way, I was shocked he knew my name, but then I remembered my name tag I wore. I told him I was going to get picked up by my boyfriend, and we were going to hang out, and I see his kind smile turn into one of disappointment. "Oh, you're seeing someone. I see. Well, they sure are very lucky to have someone like you." I did find it sort of odd this 50-something-year-old would make a sort of comment like that, but at least it's not as bad as some of the things other more creepy customers have said to me. The man pays for his sweets and ends up leaving. Over the course of the next week or two, that same man would show up, and each time he would get more and more personal with his questions. It was very obvious, and I was starting to get pretty creeped out by him. Once I was helping out a couple of the local kids, and the man actually pushed past them just so he could come up to me and ask if I had broken up with my boyfriend. Obviously not. But the craziest part was that just as soon as he had entered my life, he had left. This is the point I honestly believed he had finally gotten the hint and moved on with his life. After all, one can be hopeful. One early morning at approximately 4 a.m., I woke up because I was going to head on a road trip with my boyfriend for the weekend, who was swinging by to pick me up at 6 a.m. I made some breakfast consisting of eggs, bacon, and toast, and then sat down at the kitchen table, watching some videos on my phone. The sun was yet to come out from the horizon, so naturally it's still dark out. My dad, who entered work at 6, had just woken up and began brewing some coffee as he listened into the news. Once I finished breakfast, I walk over to the trash, only to see it's full. Therefore, I decided to take the trash out back. This is when my story takes a turn for the downright creepy. You see, I had forgotten that this day was trash day, so I had to go to the front of the house and walk over to the sidewalk. Well, parked just a short distance from the trash cans was a car where I could see a figure sitting in the driver's seat. Again, it's dark out, and I'm unable to make out any sort of details, let alone a face. Feeling a bit uneasy, I sprint back into the house and then look out the living room window. The car was now parked in my driveway, and I watch as that figure steps out into the cold early morning. My worst nightmare comes to life. The figure that was in the vehicle looks to be like the same man from the candy store. I watch as he makes his way over to my front porch, and then I can hear the doorknob begin to rattle. My nerves are at an all-time high as I scurry to my father, who had a donut and coffee in hand. Without explaining much detail, my father gets up and heads over to the front door, opening it seconds later. I was close behind him, hiding behind one of our couches. "Excuse me, but can I help you with anything?" I then can hear the man outside ask for me by name. My dad turns around and looks over at me, before telling the guy to get lost, or he was going to call the cops. He heads into his vehicle, pulls out of the driveway, and then disappears into the night. As you can probably already guess, I'm having a complete meltdown. How in the world did this creeper track me to my very own home? I couldn't explain it. It was only made worse when I started thinking, what could have happened had my parents not been home? We called the cops anyways, and I gave them all the information I could provide. After a few days of investigating, using surveillance footage from our door camera, they were able to identify the man. He later confessed he had tracked me to my home after finding me on Facebook and Instagram, where a majority of my posts were set to public. From that point, it didn't take him too long to locate my whereabouts by looking at fellow friends and followers. Thankfully, he didn't have anything on him, but that doesn't take away from the fact he was trying to get into my home. Nevertheless, I'm happy to report I got a restraining order placed against him, which was a whole process in itself, but at least it was met with a positive outcome. That outcome being never hearing from him again. Late night chase. A friend and I were playing video games really late in the evening a few years ago when we got the urge to get some snacks at 7-Eleven. It's roughly a 7-minute walk from my home that sees us going down various different neighborhoods. We did have the option to drive there, but we've always been the sorts of teens that like being out at night and enjoying the peace and quiet. Plus, I live in a very safe community where the crime rate is almost non-existent. Getting to 7-Eleven wasn't really an issue. The problem arose almost as soon as we exited the 7-Eleven. You see, in order to begin our adventure back into the neighborhoods, we first had to cross a major intersection. It's here where you'll encounter most foot traffic. Well, as my friend and I are about to cross the street, we see a couple of suspicious individuals in hoodies hanging out next to a bench on the other side of the street, where we're about to head to. My friend mentions he could have sworn one of them brandished a knife, but as I didn't see it, I was very certain my friend was just making it up to scare me. After all, that's what we teenagers do. We cross the street and begin heading toward the neighborhoods, munching on some Cheetos and drinking out of our soda bottles. Here's when we begin to hear it. Footsteps, and I mean loud and heavy footsteps, catching up to where we currently stood. We take one look behind, and we can see the suspicious guys in hoodies running toward my friend and I, with one of them grasping some sort of pocket knife. It became apparent. These two were either A, looking to jump us, or B, mug us. We drop our drinks and chips, and we begin booking it toward the end of the street, hoping we'll bump into any sort of people. I should let you know it's about 1 a.m, thus the chances of that happening are very unlikely. I can still recall one of them shouting at us to stop running, or they would make things worse. The one with the knife almost grabbed my shirt, but in that moment I got a rush of adrenaline that gave me a huge boost to my running. Sort of like in Mario Kart, when you pick up a mushroom and your cart speeds up for a matter of moments. Anyways, when we reached the end of the street, we luckily saw someone outside on their front porch holding a leash with a dog. The footsteps that were chasing my friend and I began to go quiet as we decided to run over to this homeowner who's got the strangest look across his face. His dog, a dachshund, begins barking, which together with the homeowner appeared to have deterred our chasers because when we looked back into the darkness, the two mysterious strangers are long gone, running back the way they came from. At any rate, we gave him a quick TLDR and the homeowner walked us back to my home. We did call the cops the next morning, but to this day those two have never been caught, nor were there any reports of encounters with strange people in hoodies. Edit. Some friends tell me they could have possibly been bored and trying to give us a scare, which could explain why there weren't any reports of people being followed or chased at night, but even I disliked that explanation. Summer break-in. Over the summer break last year, I had flown to Montana from California to visit my aunt and uncle for a number of weeks. They lived in a very quiet college town where the most interesting thing you'll hear happen is someone getting chased by geese in the park. For real, you don't want to mess with them. They get very aggressive, especially if it involves their babies. I digress. The point to this submission was I wanted to go over something that happened to my cousin and I at night. My aunt and uncle had gone out with a couple of their friends, and they wouldn't be back until at least 1 or 2 in the morning. At least that's what they had told us ahead of time. We spent most of that evening chilling in my cousin's room with the AC on full blast, watching movies and playing video games. Basically, a teenager's paradise. At around 7 p.m., we decided to order some McDonald's using Uber Eats. The app said the food would get to us in about 40 minutes, which gave us plenty of time to shower. My cousin went first, leaving just me in the room. 10 minutes after we ordered the food, and with my cousin still in the restroom, I got up to get some water from the kitchen. When I enter the hallway, heading toward the kitchen, I look into my aunt and uncle's room, which was open. It's about halfway between the kitchen and my cousin's room. Well, at the window, I saw a figure which looked to be cutting open the screen. My heart sank when moments later, they're trying to open the window. Jeremy! Jeremy! Someone's trying to get inside the house! I yelled like a little kid, hoping this loud and audible statement would get this potential home burglar to back off. Most home burglars won't bother entering a home unless they're certain it was empty. That's what I was hoping for. Instead, I reached the restroom, only to hear my cousin Jeremy calling to me from his room. I race over there, as footsteps are heard in my aunt and uncle's room. Are you sure someone's in here? You're messing with me, aren't you? At that moment, we both hear something fall over, which later turned out to be a very expensive vase, and we all froze like popsicles. Everything that happens next seemed to go in slow motion. It was honestly all in a span of about 20 to 30 seconds. Together, we pushed one of my cousin's dressers in front of the door, and then we proceeded to throw as much on top of it as possible. Basically, doing our best to create as much of a wall of defense. With no window for escape, I use my phone to call 911, where I give them a description of what's happening. Mind you, my cousin and I can hear things falling over and footsteps all over the place. The operator tells me officers are on their way and that we're supposed to stay where we are. Obviously, we were already ahead of her. My cousin and I grabbed a couple of his metal baseball bats from under his bed and stood there expecting a fight on our hands. Thank goodness it never came to that. Whoever entered the home did try to open our door as we saw the door handle jingle, but they quickly gave up and continued down the hallway. No more than 3 minutes later, we can hear officers shouting commands at someone to get on the ground and not to run. When all was said and done, the operator on the phone said it was safe to come outside and the officers would be waiting. Sure enough, an officer comes over to our door and instructs us it's okay to come out. So basically, what we were told later on was the man who broke in was a home burglar. They got in through the side window and then began to ransack the place. However, they made the mistake of ignoring our bluff. He probably heard these kids, actually teenagers both 18, and then assumed there was nothing we can do. Anyways, we were then told by the police that he ran out the front door, and the officers caught him just as he starts running away. Now that was the end to our creepy tale. My aunt and uncle immediately drove back to the house, and we all slept in the same room, albeit my cousin and I scared out of our minds.